Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this Governance Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 21st of May 2025. My name is Councillor Alan Platt, and I am Chair of this committee. Councillor Mark Clifford is my Vice Chair. Members are reminded that the meeting is being recorded and will be accessible on the Council's YouTube page. If you wish to speak at any stage, please indicate to me you wish to do so. When I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on and turn it off when you finish speaking. Please speak clearly and do not cover your mouth when speaking to make it easier for any lip readers to understand you. Can everyone ensure their phones are turned to silent? We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm sounds, please exit the way you came in and congregate in St Thomas's Square next to the police station. I'd also like to welcome a number of new faces to the committee. Councillors Michelle Brown and Gordon France. Gordon rejoining us following his year of fame, alongside our new members, Craig and Charlotte. Welcome. I'd also like to welcome Howard Norris, the Interim Monitoring Officer, to his first meeting of the Governance Committee. Again, welcome. And welcome to all our esteemed guests. I don't think we've ever seen so many, have we? We'll now begin the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yeah, we've just received apologies from Councillor Julia Berry, Chair, with Councillor Russ Green substituting for her. Thank you.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the responsibility to declare any pecuniary interests in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Okay, item 3, minutes of the last meeting, Wednesday, the 19th of March, 2025, pages 3 to 8 in your meeting papers. The minutes of the last meeting are included within the agenda. Are there any comments or points of accuracy to raise? Okay, can we we're happy to approve the minutes? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Item 4, the 2024-2025 External Audit Plan. This item is for us to consider and note the report. Please can I ask Georgia from our External Auditors, Grant Thornton, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Because there's a few new faces, so my name's Georgia Jones. I'm a Director at Grant Thornton, and Grant Thornton are the Council's External Auditors. And this is our audit plan, so this sets out the work in relation to the year ending 31st of March 2025 that we intend to do on the Council's financial statements, and also covers the other part of our work, which is our value for money work. So I'll take you briefly through the report, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. So the first part of the report is really just some context, some information, some background. So it starts off on kind of agenda page 12, which is page 4 of our report. Just a bit of information, which I'm sure you're already aware of, around local government reorganisation. Then the following page just goes through a few kind of recent developments around local audit reform. And then some key developments on the next page, which potentially impact on our audit approach. But again, really just for background and information, some of those will be applicable to this particular council, and some are applicable more to kind of unitaries and Mets. But we just kind of gather all that information together so that you've got it really just for interest. And then on the following page, there's just some new accounting standards and reporting developments, just again for your information. And then on page 16 of the agenda, the key developments in terms of our audit approach, again, just for your information, really, and just really our commitments to you as your auditors. And then this following page has got some information on one of those new standards, which is IFRS 16, which is around leases. So it's just a change in the way leases are accounted for within the accounts if the council is the lessee. I won't go into that in too much detail, but obviously, again, it's just there so that you know we've got some new work this year in terms of the financial statements, and just really setting out the background for you around that. And then really from page 19, agenda page 19, page 11 of our report, It just kind of then goes into the meat, I suppose, of the audit plan, sets out kind of our responsibility and the scope of the audit. But really the next page, on page 20, really sets out all of the key information summarised from the rest of the audit plan. So it sets out the significant risks we've identified. So management override of controls is a mandatory significant risk for all audits, whether public sector or commercial audits. So we always have that in and we cannot rebut it. So that's a mandatory risk, and it really our work around that centres on the journals that the council posts in terms of its financial statements, any estimates made and any accounting policies, and particularly if any of those had changed for the year. And then the other two main significant risks are the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties. And that's because even though the council has a professional valuer to look at those kind of valuations, they are based on professional judgment and are essentially in accounting terms an estimate. There are a lot of assumptions underpinning those estimates, and we need to make sure that we are satisfied those assumptions are appropriate. And then the valuation of the net fund pension liability or asset, as it will turn out once the actuaries have done their report. Again, you have an actuary to do those figures, but again, there's a lot of assumptions that underpin those figures, and we again need to make sure that we are satisfied with those assumptions and with all of those that the figures have been accounted for and disclosed correctly within the accounts. So we'll do our work around those, and within the body of the report, there's separate pages for each of those, and it sets out what the risk is exactly around those and the work we will carry out to mitigate that risk. And we'll report back to you in our audit findings report later in the year. The council prepares group financial statements because it consolidates the subsidiaries that the council has in terms of Chorley Leisure Limited and Chorley Property Limited. So we do audit the group accounts. So that's not to say we audit in detail the accounts of those two companies, but we make sure the figures are consolidated in an appropriate manner into the council's group financial statements. We have a materiality level that we work to. So we have determined that at the planning stage. So what we use is last year's audited accounts initially to determine that planning materiality figure, and then we will update it when we get the actual financial statements for 24-25. But that, again, that's set out for your information so you know the figures that we are working to. So we use a benchmark, so we use the council's operating costs for the year, and that's equivalent to 1.9% of the prior year operating costs. We will report any areas that we identify which are over our trivial level. So that's been set at 52,000 for the group and 49,000 for the council. So any errors we find over that, we will report to you in our audit findings report. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the second part of our work is value for money. So just to remind members who are previously on committee, and just to explain for any new members, we are not making a judgment on whether the council provides value for money. We are looking at the arrangements you have in place to enable you to do so. So it's a slightly kind of subtle distinction. So we have a separate value for money team. They have started their work for the year. So they will look at 3 criteria: financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And again, we will report back to you on our findings in the auditor's annual report. And that should be issued around the same time as the audit findings report. We intend to bring them together to the committee so that you can see the results of all of our work. So we've obviously had our planning visit early in the year. Our final accounts visit will take place June to December. And as I say, we'll bring our audit findings report and our auditor's annual report to yourselves to report on all the findings. We've got the audit fee set out there. And we just also need to confirm to you annually that we comply with the Financial Reporting Council's ethical standards, and also to reconfirm our independence from the council. So that's really a summary of all of the rest of the audit plan, which sets out all of those things in more detail. So I propose to kind of pause there, but obviously happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Georgia. Over to the members of the committee now, independent persons, sorry. Councillor Green.
Yes, thanks very much for that. Just wonder, any risks you identify throughout, how do we as a council, this is probably our council officers, how do we make sure that they're captured and tracked and have ownership? So one of my things in my life is that quite often you find risks, and sometimes you go, who owns that? And it's like, oh, who's pointing at each other. So it's just, wherever you find, how do we guarantee that that will be captured and mapped and against an appropriate owner.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want me to answer that? So from an internal point of view, all the external actions are treated in the same way as the internal audit actions, and that they're included on the risk management system. They're monitored and they're reported through to the Officer Corporate Governance Group, who meet about 2 to 3 times every 6 months.
So for you, Georgina, will there be a summary of what the table's list of risks are, and then you can map those straight across into your risk capture tool?
So our reports will have any kind of recommendations that come out of either the audit work or the value for money work, and that's, I think, what gets transferred onto the council's tracker. And then also when we come back the following year, we will kind of follow up all of those recommendations as well to make sure that we feel they've been actioned to our satisfaction, and we'll report back to you on that aspect as well.
Great. Smashing. Yeah, thanks very much for that.
So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, and thank you, George. It's a really clear report. Just in terms of the audit fee, I note that the IFRS 16 hasn't been decided yet. Have we got any indications of what that cost could be? And I might be looking at Neil as well around. Do we have an idea now of the levels of leases and whether there's additional risk there that we need to consider as a committee?
So in terms of the actual amount, it will partly depend on the amount of work we have to do. So obviously we have kind of a baseline amount of work that we think we have to do, but then that might kind of vary depending on how good the council's records are, if we find any errors, if there's kind of, any additional work that we weren't anticipating we have to do. But what I would say is, like, when we come to kind of decide that fee, we will discuss it with Neil first and make sure that we are able to justify to Neil, and also that he is satisfied that we can justify it. And then also it has to then go as a fee variation to PSAA, so Public Sector Audit Appointments, who appoint us as your auditors. And we have to evidence to them as well why we're asking for that particular fee. And they challenge us quite robustly, quite often, sort of thing. So it has to be approved by them as well before we can bill you or anything like that. So there's a number of processes it goes through, but it will be in the audit findings report as well, coming to yourselves so that you can see it and you can also question ourselves on it.
I think just from me as well, because we've known IFRS 16 has been coming for quite some time, it's been delayed quite a number of times. We've done a lot of the preparation work, so we've asked colleagues throughout departments, we've gathered information on leases already. So we kind of quantified what it is. We don't think it's a huge impact on our accounts. But again, it will partly be during the audit work if there's kind of examination of things that might consider to be IFRS 16 and we've considered them not to be. Depends how big that becomes. But we don't anticipate it being a huge impact on the accounts.
Any more questions? Councillor Hayden?
Thank you, Chair. Can we talk about progress against last year's audit recommendations? Page 34. I have a question about the journal arrangements, and there's some kind of like imbalance about your recommendations and what we feel as a council that we can do. So yourselves have identified a particular way that you think they should be managed, but the council update is that they haven't got the scope to introduce that particular arrangement, and I just wondered how we were going to get over that.
Yeah, and then
Just from my perspective, I suppose there's two elements. One element of it is it is difficult to do the best practice because of the size of our team, in terms of it being relatively small, and some of that's about hierarchy and availability of people to authorise so that things can still happen in a timely manner. I think one of our other limitations is our current finance system, which we're in the process of changing, and we're already discussing what controls in there we can do, which will then kind of communicate with audit and say, does this meet the requirements in the new system that the old system didn't quite work for? So we are still looking to address that issue, but it is difficult in a smallish team to create a hierarchy when there's not a huge volume of staff above.
Any way that you could update that within this document to show that you are making some progress against that in time for the accounts? I don't know.
yeah, sorry. So what I would say is whenever we find a control that we think potentially should be in place for best practice and isn't, we are obliged to report it to yourselves as those charged with governance. Now, it's not couched as a significant control deficiency, and that's because we feel there are other kind of surrounding kind of processes that kind of mitigate that risk somewhat. And also, we do a lot of testing on journals, and we didn't find any actual issues in terms of journals not being appropriate or misposted or anything like that. So I guess that is kind of your assurance that I don't have big concerns about it, but I am obliged to report it to yourselves as those charged with governance. We wouldn't update it in the plan as such because that is the position as it is, but we will of course be doing a lot of journals testing again as part of this audit. So again, we'll report back to you to say, okay, you know, currently this authorisation still isn't in place because of the reasons Neil's explained to you. However, we've done our testing and hopefully again, we haven't found anything. So I guess that's the kind of assurance you get in terms of that control, that best practice control not being in place. And sorry, I'd also just say this council isn't alone in that. A lot of councils who don't have big finance teams or who don't have the sophistication within the system, that can happen. But we just adjust our risk and testing to try and kind of mitigate anything around that.
It just seems a bit untidy the way that it's left, that's all. Do we need to say anything about that or not, or just leave it as it is?
And well, personally, I mean, it's our audit plan, and I would say I would leave it as it is because that is how it is at the moment. That's the facts sort of thing. So, but what we'll do is we probably will report it again because nothing's really going to change. But perhaps in our audit findings report, we'll try and give a bit more context, that kind of, you know, as Neil's just explained, and perhaps do that context about our test and the results of the testing, if that would be helpful.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. It's just to further to Councillor Hayden's question. So just, I understand the comment about recoding and whether it, you know, what the risk is around that when you're not changing the levels. But I just wonder then for other journals, is there a de minimis or a threshold where you would absolutely have to have a second signature for it when we're not doing that?
So there is an authorisation on all journals other than RECODES. There's always an authorisation. I think the issue is the hierarchy of authorisation. Often it's a colleague at a similar level authorising it because we haven't got the kind of tiers or levels to ensure it's always someone above the person who's entering the journal. So there's always a second authorisation on everything other than RECODES.
I just wonder if it's just worth to help mitigate the risks that we've already recognised in here, considering that if it's above a certain level, it can't be a colleague on the same level or a junior colleague. It's got to be a certain level of management, maybe just to help with that risk.
And I think that's what we were saying, because I think we did find that, you know, last year there was some occasions, not a massive amount, but some occasions where a more junior colleague authorised, you know, the kind of the more senior colleagues' journal. And as you quite rightly point out, that's potentially a risk because, again, not saying it happened here, but the risk is that undue influence could be put on the junior colleagues. So, but I think that is something that has been addressed, that particular area of what we've reported, and obviously we'll come back to you this year to confirm that.
Councillor Green.
And Z, and you've got that recorded and captured, then at least we've got an audit process to justify not doing that. Do we do that at the moment in time?
So it does form part of our response to at the end of the audit in terms of the recommendation saying this is what we're able to do and these are the limitations slightly on it. I appreciate the point, it probably does need fleshing out that narrative within there to communicate all those issues. It's not that we're not trying to work towards it, it's trying to do it in a way of saying what can we do which doesn't take away our ability to be able to complete tasks in a timely manner, because it can delay things significantly if we have to kind of create artificial structures. But also it is an inbuilt issue with the current system, and we are looking at kind of going, the new system we'll need to structure it to meet this recommendation.
And that's totally fair. I just think by justifying that, you've got it all clear and it's above board. And if everybody challenge, why haven't you done that? You can say, look, we can't do that for X, Y, and Z. Should something go wrong, you say, look, we couldn't have done it for X, Y, and Z. And it's all up and front and board.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd just add to that as well, that even if the kind of is that justification there, and it seems a perfectly reasonable justification, if we still think it's a control deficiency, we'll still end up reporting it, but then obviously you'll have that perhaps more detailed, you know, response sort of thing. But as I say, we are satisfied that the kind of all the journal testing we do has not actually revealed anything has been posted incorrectly or, you know, as an erroneous journal or anything like that.
That's a fair point. It just allows us to stop asking the same question if it comes up time and we know, you know, why you haven't done it. So, yeah.
Councillor Hayden?
Can you just ask about the escalation policy? Is that general across all your client group, or is it just for Chorley?
Yeah, our escalation policy is the policy for all clients.
Okay, any more questions? Sorry, Peter. I'm glued to looking this way.
No, it's not really why I'm here, but it's talk about journals. The question that's in my mind is if Chorley had a proper authorisation hierarchy, would the amount of testing done by external auditor be the same or less?
It's a good question and a potentially difficult one to answer, because that is only part of our risk assessment process for kind of deciding what journals to test. So we've got quite a kind of complex tool that we use where we put lots and lots of information in around kind of not just the processes, but, you know, the type of journals posted, authorisation limits or posting limits, where we think the risk might lie. So potentially, if it was a council in very difficult financial position, we'd be then putting more emphasis on journals that might reduce expenditure or increase income and things like that. So it's one part of quite a big picture. So it may have some marginal effect, but I couldn't definitely say kind of, it depends kind of how the risk profiles kind of fit together and score and things. So it may have some effect, but it may not be kind of a big change in the sample size.
Okay, thanks, Georgia. Just one question. Page 16 in your report, and this will only require a simple one-word answer. One of the points is, at an appropriate point within the audit, we would also like to meet informally with the chair of your governance committee to brief them on the status and progress of the audit work to date. Could that be extended to the members of the committee, which might hopefully avoid some, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to meet with any and all members of the committee.
Thank you. Any more questions? No further questions. We'll move on to the next item. It's item 5, the Internal Audit Report and Opinion, 2024-2025, pages 61 to 146 in your papers. This item is for us to consider and note the report. Can I ask Dawn to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is our annual report and opinion, and it summarises all the work that we've undertaken during the course of the year, and it allows us to provide an annual opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the organisation's governance, risk management and control processes. I'll not go through the report in great detail, but if I could just draw your attention to certain aspects. So, as required by the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, we are required to confirm our independence on an annual basis, and that's set out from pages 67, the bottom of 67, top of 68, where we set out how we ensure that our independence is maintained and that we have no restrictions in scope in our audits. It's also important that to allow us to provide an opinion that we ensure that the whole authority is covered within our audit reviews, so that we are not basing our opinion on a small section of the authority. So the pie chart at the top of page 69 sets out the number of reviews that we've completed in each specific area. And then what we do is we move down to show how those reviews have been finalised with the assurance rating awarded to each individual review. Again, I'm not going to go through each of them in detail. We have provided copies of all the reports throughout the course of the year. For any that we haven't provided copies of previously, we've attached as appendices to this report. There were 4 limited assurance reports over the course of the year, and we've provided an update on each of them. For the vulnerability management, there was just one, the action outstanding. All the others have been actioned in full. The fuel management, good progress has been made with those actions, and the reasons why the remaining 2 are delayed are set out in the report. The review of CCTV and the cemeteries, we have actually got the officers here who are able to respond in more detail than I can about where the actions are up to. CCTV, there were staffing issues, I understand, but I think progress is being made, but obviously Alan, who's our Head of Operational Assets, will again be able to provide more detail on that. And in terms of the cemeteries and closed graveyards, that literally was a report we finalised the week this report was published. So Chris, who's our Head of Street Scene and Waste, literally only received that just as this report was being published. So it's not that the actions will be implemented, but he's there to provide some more clarity about the report if that's required. Just moving on, we've provided some details on our anti-fraud and corruption work that we do. Whilst we're not fraud investigators, we do take the lead from a fraud perspective. And we set out some details there about some whistleblowing concerns that have been received, the policies that have been reviewed over the past 12 months, and also about the NFI exercise, and that's detailed in paragraph 27. We do a bit of some work on the assurance rating to compare the direction of travel for the authority over the past 3 years, and that's set out under paragraph 28. And as you can see there, we're broadly staying consistent in terms of the assurance ratings that are being awarded. The other thing we've done is we've benchmarked our assurance ratings and the numbers against other local authorities, and we are broadly consistent with other local authorities as well. We do not have, you know, a number of limited reports that's out of kilter with everybody else. So we are broadly in line within Lancashire. We follow up all our internal audit agreed actions. Again, some other authorities only follow up high risks. We don't take that approach. We follow up them all. We have an implementation rate target of 90%. We have fallen slightly short of that this year, but what I would say is there is evidence with the stability of the senior leadership team that those actions are being owned and they are being implemented quicker. There's just in a few instances where we agree revised dates, and these could be for a variety of reasons, some of which are outside of the control of the service. So that is something we have to accept. Risk management, we've got a whole report on, so I'll go through that in more detail when we're on that item on the agenda. Similarly with corporate governance. To allow the opinion to be formed, we can place reliance on other sources of assurance, which we do. So if we're aware of external consultants coming in and providing reports, if we've got other agencies coming in where they can provide assurance, we use that not only to form the opinion, but we also use it when we're planning which audit reviews we will undertake for the following year, to make sure there's no duplication and that we can take their work and use it to help us form the opinion. So over the course of the year, we have also provided audits for Chorley Leisure Limited. We did 3 separate reviews. All the results were reported to the Board of Directors. And we also undertook a governance assurance workshop with them, and that was last summer, which is due to be repeated this summer. So taking all that work into consideration that we did for the leisure companies, we've provided them with adequate assurance. So finally on to the opinion for the council. As it says there, based on the work that we've done, the other sources of assurance, we consider that the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the governance, risk management and control processes are adequate for the financial year ended 31st of March. The final pages are just about our compliance with the public sector internal audit standards and our own performance, which is set out under paragraph 44. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks, Dawn. Any questions for Dawn? Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. I heard we have officers in who can actually discuss CCTV, and the CCTV review has been ongoing for a very long time now. The dates have slipped. The problem is with a CCTV review, there's been many applications for new CCTV installations due to antisocial behaviour. Where are we actually up to on this? Because it has carried on for too long, and there's a date saying May. Will the review be completed in May, or is it not that I'm going to say it's a word I absolutely hate, is it just ongoing? Thank you.
Mine's on there.
Ah.
Yeah.
Should be able to hear me now. Yeah, of course I can give you an update. As Dawn mentioned, we've had some staffing issues and turnover. We've had no head of ICT for quite some time. Rob's just started now, so that's really helpful. Obviously, Chris Meister left, who was the Director of Governance, and the Operations Manager, who was writing the CLP, broke his collarbone, so there were some delays and obviously offset. But to give you an update on where we are, MA10, which is a training and awareness audit action, that's now been completed. All SIA training's been booked in, staff have been onboarded, MPV level 2 veterans been done, and then when the new staff starts, because it's been a long recruitment process, we've already booked in the SIA training for them. So that's a positive step, because we've got start dates now, so everything's booked in for that. Security of images. So IT have done some great work with the police on the NICE system. I think that went live last week, so now we can automatically send the images required to the police instead of burning off a CD, and that's always been a problem. We've diarised all the existing CDs that we have in the calendar, so we've got deletion dates, and also on Friday we had all the historic images deleted by a waste company, so we can get certification, so that's implemented as well. And that obviously links into MA9, which is image retention as well. So that's 3 more actions that have been closed, and then there's quite a few actions that have been implemented, but they're just linked to the CLP. So, for example, one of them is templates, forms, and procedures in place, so that the staff know what they're doing and how they do it, and new onboarded staff. But that's also linked to the CLP, which has been delayed. So the majority of the things have been done, but it's just the audit action links it to the code of practice, and to get the code of practice needs to be signed off and uploaded onto our internal learning hub system. So there obviously was a delay with the code of practice. Now I'm really grateful for legal, who've jumped on it this week for us and pushed it forward, and that just needs reviewing now. And then once it's been reviewed, that's implemented, and I think that will then link to about 4 or 5 of the actions that can be closed down as well. So I don't think we're far away from closing the actions out completely.
If I can just come back on that, I'm trying to pin a date down really on this, because there are numerous applications outstanding for CCTV installations, and the usual answer will be we can't look at that until the CCTV review is complete. So do we have a date when you'll be able to start looking at these applications? Thank you.
Yes, I don't see a problem with that. So the majority of these audit actions, I'd say another 6 of them probably can be signed off within the next month, as long as with the staffing capacity. And then as far as the new applications, probably the best thing to do would be to wait till September, until the current CCTV system has been in for 12 months, and then we can draw down an operational log of how how much the cameras have been used here, there and everywhere. Then the board would meet and address, look at all those cameras, see how many have been used, see if they're relevant or not relevant, and also then look at the potential of adding to that system. So I would probably say, for everything September, and I'd say for 90% of it within a month.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know what other members think, but I do believe around September, if there's a meeting, it will be good to see you back. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
I've got a few points, but I'll dip in and out and come back as you call through. But the first one I just want to make a point about is looking at the vulnerability management. And it says, as reported to committee, throughout year, at the year, 7 actions were agreed, with only 1 remaining outstanding relating to an improved cyber security policy. This has been drafted and is currently in progress of being improved. Just producing a policy doesn't mitigate anything. It's all the stuff that sits under the policy. So in terms of mitigating this vulnerability or pushing it away from limited, what's going to drive us moving away from limited? The policy, just implementing a policy as such won't. It's all the various things that sits under that. And I think we need some more granularity about what sits under that policy and how that's been implemented to show how we're driving away from limited up to where we need to be.
Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, so we, under the policy, we have included measures that we will be moving forward with to mitigate some of the vulnerabilities. In the meantime, we have implemented pilot schemes of some of the features of that policy, including a security operations centre, which is currently under, so it's 24/7 monitoring of the council's networks by a third party. They highlight any suspicious activity across the network for us to review, and out of hours take action if required on those alerts. So there are mitigations that we're putting in place while we're waiting for this policy to go through, with then, once the policy is published, the view to move forward with those actions permanently rather than pilot schemes.
Just so on that, obviously public forum is probably not an ideal place to go through all that sort of stuff, but I just wonder whether there's a forum to actually say, you know, where we are, you know, what bits you've got implemented, what haven't you, and where you were going with risk at the moment in time. I wouldn't suggest probably this was an ideal forum for it, because you wouldn't want to be reading that, but some way for us as, you know, councillors to get assurance that you are actually filling those gaps and you're driving yourself away from limited. Because it's great to see you've got a SOC in place and you are doing something, but we've got no visibility actually what you actually are and giving us some assurance that you actually drive into a safe set. And given the current climate and what's been going on at the moment in time, I think it's quite important.
Through the chair, is it okay if I respond to that question? Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point in relation to cybersecurity, but the kind of limited assurance is in respect of the policy itself, and you're quite right, it's not the policy, it's what actually the work that substantiates the kind of the relevance of that policy on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to reassure the committee, I'm more than happy to provide the detail behind that which you've asked offline, but just to reassure this committee that there are a number of different initiatives that build up to make sure that that policy is compliant on a day-to-day basis, such as we have regular phishing emails that go out to our staff and members to ensure that the areas of the biggest risk are managed effectively. We comply with the council's penetration tests externally to ensure that the network is secure, As my colleague has alluded to, there are other measures in place on a day-to-day basis. We have security around email and the network and infrastructure. So there are a raft of different initiatives that comply with that policy. I think the key point is that the policy essentially kind of groups that together to provide the reassurance to the committee and the council that actually those initiatives have been undertaken, but just to reassure you that they are done on a day-to-day basis, and I'm more than happy to provide some of that detail offline.
Thanks, Asim. Any more questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn, for the report. Just in terms, you mentioned that we chase all actions, whether they're red, amber or grey, or whatever rating that they've been given. But I don't think the report details that around of the actions that haven't been completed as yet, how many are actually a significant risk or are red for the council. So I think that might be helpful to see that, because it may be that in some areas the easier risk, that the easier ones are done first, and the more difficult it may have a larger risk or not. And then I'm just wondering about the previous years as well. So 23, 24 example, I think we were, I can't remember the percentages on here, but so there was some outstanding risks or actions from audits from the previous year as well, and whether they've actually been completed now. And I note that the report talks about clear evidence of ownership, because the revised dates are reducing, which is good, but I think it would be helpful for us to see how many have actually surpassed those dates and how many dates have actually been changed, because that's where you get, coming up to the ones we've already been talking about, we're moving and moving and moving the dates. I think it would actually be helpful to see what the original agreed date, because they are agreed with the services, what they were and how many have actually slipped on that. So although it says there's clear evidence, I don't think the report actually gives us that clear evidence as a committee.
Just a couple of points to come back on that. We don't actually red, amber, green our actions at all. And the reason we don't do that is because we feel if the action warrants reporting, then it should be followed up. So that's why we take that approach and follow everything up. So I do accept your point about there are higher risks, but we do that by timelines. So what we do is if it's a high risk that needs mitigation quickly, then we put in a very short time scale. That's how we do our red, amber, green, so to speak, without doing the red, amber, green, if that makes sense. I have no qualms about sharing more information about the implementation of actions, and I can produce, when I come back in September with an interim report, I can provide a more detailed breakdown of actions, if that would be helpful.
I think it would, and just taking your point there, if we've got high risks with short timelines, and those timelines are then being moved, that's the bit the committee aren't seeing. So, and some of the ones we've talked about already feel like they're high risk, but we don't know that as a committee. So I think just something around that to help with assurance would be helpful. Thank you.
Can I just come back? I think although it's not set out in that way, I think by the fact that we report the limited assurance reports and how they're, because we do put a lot more meat on the bones in terms of the limited assurance reports, that you are getting the assurance that those actions are being implemented. And if there are reasons why not, then the officers are generally asked to attend to explain. So that's how we manage that one.
Councillor Hayden.
It's on another subject. It's not what we've just discussed. It's about Chorley Leisure. If I can ask a question about the Chorley Leisure. Identified quite a lot of issues with the HR arrangements for payments, registering staff, DB checks, etc. And I know that you've got a clear plan of how you're going to manage those. I think it's just a bit disappointing that it kind of like, it turned out as it did with all these aspects not being controlled. Was that something that was embedded before it came to Chorley, within Chorley Council's remit?
That's not something we could really provide any assurance on about whether they're the historical issues or not, because we could only audit what's in place at the current time. They were included in the last review, so we know what the issues were going back 2 to 3 years, but prior to that, we couldn't provide any assurance on that, whether they're historical issues.
So will we get an update on whether all those items the actions have been implemented and is running correctly as to plan?
The board of directors would get the assurance and follow-up of the management actions for Chorley Leisure, but this one is actually a shared report that covers the council as well, so you will get updates on that as well.
And also, it's on the final internal audit report, it covers all the councils as one pot, but yet some of it, especially the stuff related to Chorley Leisure, does that not cloud the report, because we don't know which areas of the council are coming under expectations?
When we do that really for efficiency purposes, that we're trying to, we have limited resource and we're trying to cover a wide range of issues. So we try to group as many audits together as we can and cover a much bigger footprint. If there are specific issues relating to either one specific council or one specific leisure company, we do highlight that within the report. So if it's not highlighted, it affects everything, all 4 entities.
Councillor Green.
Just in terms of actions, what I can't get from the report is, well, first of all, what are we actually aiming for? Are we aiming for substantial, or is adequate? Is there an aim for where we're trying to get to? Are we always trying to get substantial, or trying to get full? Or once you got to adequate, is that all right? That's my first question in terms of where we are with that actions.
That's not actually for me to answer.
Right.
That is for directors and the senior management team to answer.
Right. Yeah.
I can only report on what's actually in place at the point in time of the audit.
Right.
We don't have a target of where we want to get to, but that is for the management team to decide where they want to be as an authority.
So in terms of the actions that have been produced, they're not being produced by you; they've been produced by the others. Because what I can't see is that some of the actions seem a bit top level, and I couldn't see how just by this action here that will that actually do? Will it, for example, if something's considered to be adequate by doing these things, will we then jump to substantial? So I couldn't see them as being, sparse, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic time. But I can't. So I don't know where that falls with you. Who takes ownership of those?
So there's a couple of different things there. So when the audit is carried out, it's a point in time point of view. So we identify the weaknesses within the system that we've looked at, or where the risk is not being fully mitigated, and we highlight that to the manager or the head of service, whoever we're dealing with that particular audit. It is for them then to make the decision about what they can do to mitigate that risk, working in conjunction with us. So if we don't feel that what they're doing is strong enough, we then have an escalation process in place where we can take that and say, we can escalate it to the director or the chief exec and say, you feel there's still risks outstanding. If, after we've exhausted all those pathways, we then can bring it to this committee and say, you've got risks that are not mitigated. And these are the reasons why. And then it's for the committee to decide whether we're accepting that level of risk or not. We've never actually got to there.
Yeah.
We've never gone to a committee meeting and said we feel. We always come to some agreement with the team that we've audited and the directors. We have a good relationship with the other directors, so that we don't ever get to a point where we have to bring it here.
So do you know their goal? So if they say, look, we're achieving substantial here, for you to then go, actually, you're not achieving that substantial, by just doing this, you're not going to shift the dial anyway. It's that bit where you can go, you're not, this action you've come back with me to is not going to actually drive anywhere near where your target, if they got that target.
They might have, and they might come back and question our rating, but ultimately it's our opinion and it's evidence-based. So they have to provide us with evidence of how that risk is being further mitigated.
Yeah.
So that assurance rating stands unless they can provide additional evidence. So they at the start of a review, they may think, oh, I know this service is substantial, and that's where they think they are, and it may well be. But until obviously we do the review, we can't say.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask them the question, say, this is your substantial, are you achieving this by this action? So, yeah. Yes. I just want, just one other one while I'm on. In terms of the report, I mean, coverage is really good. The one area I just thought about was it seems to be a lot of focus on, you know, financial risks and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing that didn't strike just reading this was that where's our position in terms of general health and safety risks? The question is, you know, how through this, whether this is the right report to actually give us a feel for where we are in terms of keeping our people safe. I'm sure we are, but just being able to present that, you know, it's all the stuff here. I didn't see our health and safety, and we're keeping them safe by, we've got all the various mitigations in place. So.
It very much depends on what type of audit it is.
Yeah.
So like you say, if we've got a review of homelessness where we would cover lone working or things like that from a health and safety point of view, if we were looking at treasury management, we wouldn't touch health and safety necessarily because it's a pure financial report. The standards are very clear about all the things we need to include, and they keep adding more and more. So we need to consider climate change, we need to consider fraud, we need to consider health and safety. The remit is broadening all the time of all the things we need to include. Now, there will be certain aspects where we obviously we've got limited resource, so we have to form a view on whether we are the right people to look at a health and safety aspect or whether the health and safety team should be looking at it.
Yeah.
So although it might not be included, we may get our assurance from elsewhere.
So is there not, because it is through support, is there nothing to show us where we are with that? Just whether it take it from another party who's done that audit, just to put this in and say, actually, as a liner, where we are in terms of achieving.
Yeah, what we do is from because health and safety also sits within the audit and risk service, we present the committee with the annual health and safety report.
Okay.
So that will be coming in the next few months.
Yeah, great, smashing. Yeah, great. Thanks, Dawn.
Thanks for that. Sorry, Craig was first, and then I'll come back to you, Charlotte, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question in relation to the payroll audit? I think you've identified that over 50% of the actions from 2023 haven't been implemented in the latest review. Can I just ask what the explanation was for that?
For payroll, there was a change within the leadership within that team, and there'd been a bit of a restructure. So although the previous manager had implemented, it had been lost within the new recruitment. So there was evidence that the tasks had been undertaken, but unfortunately with the embedding and the induction and the crossover, a few of them had fallen off, unfortunately.
So just to follow up, Chair, so I suppose what steps have been taken to make sure that can't happen with other services?
Well, one is we always make it clear within our audit report if we find that they have dropped off, so the service is aware of it, and we make sure that within our procedures we always look at previous audit actions, so we'll always encompass that as part of our review to make sure they're done.
Concerning, Chair, 50% of the actions weren't implemented fully.
I think they were implemented, as Jackie alluded to, they were implemented. When we did our follow-ups, we received assurance that they had been implemented. What Jackie said is with the changes within the service and the changes in staffing, they'd lapsed again. So one of the things that we have, we mention more or less in every single review is the need for procedures and supervisory checks to make sure that these are documented processes that don't have the opportunity to fall down again.
Sorry, Charlotte, you were next.
I just wanted perhaps to state the obvious that it's very clear hearing these accounts and these reports and the cross-examination that you've been given that as an independent service you're performing very well and holding up robustly. So I take reassurance from that. And am I right in thinking you've dealt with a lot of reports this year, and there's been a period of change within the council in terms of departmental structuring or change of staff, which is showing up things that maybe new people coming in are highlighting? Or is that, because there's a lot of work on the cemeteries, which is fascinating and some elements concerning, but I'm guessing that there's a period of change.
To a certain extent, there's always a period of change. You know, it's very, very rare that we have a level of stability across all services. So that there is always some change within the authority. What we try to do when we're producing the plan is look for where those areas of risk are and where those areas of change are, and incorporate them into the plans to make sure that, you know, that the high level risks are being managed appropriately.
And I guess as well, Jet, the environment, as you've alluded to with homelessness, the environment keeps changing. So new personnel coming in, bringing different skill sets and different approaches. So that's positive, isn't it? Yeah. And the cemetery situation is being addressed.
I think we do need to move progress now, I'm just concerned that the officers don't get the impression that the committee's shooting the messenger. We know what a good job you do. Are there any more questions, which, if we can keep it to the report and not what may be and what should be? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's just on the payroll one. So it talks in the body of the report about an ex-employee that was continued to be paid after they'd left the council, but it doesn't say that was addressed and the money was recouped. So I just wondered about that.
It was ongoing while we were doing the review. I don't have the outcome of that at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I just have one point. Sorry.
Through you, Chair. So we do have a process in place whereby if obviously an individual's been paid, overpaid in this case, there is a debt process, which obviously we would instigate in terms of obviously taking them to court if required.
Thanks, Taz. Just from me, just one question. Chris has very kindly joined us. The cemeteries doesn't read great from my... Now, there's a few things which are due to be dealt with shortly. Are we on track to deal with the outstanding items, Chris?
Yes, we are. In short, we've already completed some of the actions. So actions 9, 10 and 11 are already complete, and we're on track, especially with the ones that are due in June.
Lovely, thanks very much. If there are no further questions, I think we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6, the Internal Audit Effectiveness Review. This item is for us to consider and note the report, and Jackie's going to present this item.
So the purpose of the report is to provide you with the results of the self-assessment that's been carried out by the Internal Audit Service, and this sets out against the public sector internal audit standards and the local government application note, and basically assesses the effectiveness of our team. The public sector internal audit standards set out a number of requirements, and one of them is for us to undertake self-assessments on an annual basis, and then we have a further external validation which is carried out every 5 years. So the appendix that's attached to the report sets out the 135 different aspects that we need to show conformance to, and out of these 130 we show full conformance, with the remaining 5 not applicable for the service that we provide. If anybody has any questions you'd like to ask us about the results of that, I'm happy to accept them.
Thanks, Jackie. Any questions? You've got away very lightly there. Lovely. Right. Item 7. Sorry, that was just for noting, was it? Yeah, item 7. Risk Management Annual Report, pages 193 to 206. This item is for us to consider and note the report. Dawn again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is a new report. It's the first time we've presented risk management as an annual report. It is to set out and help the committee give them assurance about how risk is being managed throughout the authority. It's a positive report. It sets out how the background and approach to how we manage risk, how we've set our risk appetite, our monitoring and reporting arrangements, what training we do, what level of support there is available for staff. And we've also put in some information about how our insurance mitigates some risk as well. So I wasn't intending to go through the report in any great detail. Like I say, it covers all those different aspects, and I've put quite a lot of detail in under each heading, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Dawn. Any questions? Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. This came from basically the Local Government Association training that I'd been on, that there is a council in the north that does things slightly differently. And I'm just wondering if Dawn could explain, is this something that internal audit have been looking at and maybe learning from this other council? Thank you.
Within our business plan for this year, we have a project to look at how we manage risk within the authority. It's more to do with how we score risk and the matrix that we use. So that's something we're going to be looking at over the next few months. Any changes or any conclusions that's reached from that work, we will bring back to the committee for them to consider.
Okay. Any further questions? We're moving on now. Item 8, the management responses to audit planning enquiries, pages 207 to 240. This item's for decision. We're asked to review and approve the management responses to the auditors. Neil will present this item.
Give Dawn a break for a second. So these are we do this response annually, so it's an annual response that we do in respect of where we stand in the audit planning inquiries and what we feel we have in place to meet the queries that are asked. The responses as a result are often quite similar year on year, where there's not been major changes. So I'm just going to talk through where there's kind of some key differences or changes this year. In terms of the main kind of issues that we expect, we've talked earlier on about IFRS 16. It's a new requirement around leases, so we're expecting a bit more conversations around leases this year. We've put interest rates and interest receivable partly because the council has generated more interest receivable this year than because of the higher interest rates and our management of that resource. So we're expecting potentially that might be an area that external audit want to look at. Agency costs within property services were particularly high during the period. So again, we kind of flagged that up as an area that people might want to look at because it will show in the tables that it's that bit higher. We do have a new valuer this year. We've had a period where we've had a couple of years with single years for the valuers. We've procured new valuers. The new valuers are a local authority trading company, so they have more local authority background. As a result, they are challenging us in some of our assumptions. Nothing huge at this minute, but it is a change. And I think obviously that's different valuation assumptions that they might make, different working papers, so clearly that's a change for both ourselves and the external auditors. And then during the year we did change our arrangements with Chorley Leisure, which meant we operated in an agency arrangement, which means the income became the council's income. So as a result, we've had to make various accounting adjustments and recognise that income in the council's accounts. So that's quite a significant change in the accounts. So again, it will very easily flag up in the tables as a material change when those tables come through. So they're the kind of key events that we thought would impact the statements this year. In terms of the other categories, we do speak to colleagues in both legal and Dawn in respect of audit, and just go through and check in respect of fraud and any other factors. Laws and regulations, we're not expecting huge changes. Again, we mentioned IFRS 16, but there's not huge changes that really impact our kind of narrative of what we're responding to these questions. Related parties, again, no material changes this year, so we're not expecting significant change in that area. going concern, again, there's no huge kind of commentary on that. I think that there is clearly, and this is possibly a bit more through the VFM audit, that discussion about the ongoing of funding arrangements, local government reorganisation, and all the things that might change over the coming years. But for the purposes of the 24-25 accounts, that's not going to make a material change in terms of those accounts themselves. So I can't see that being a huge area of focus, but probably a bigger area of focus around VFM. And then in terms of other assumptions, the assumptions that always outside of property pension valuations is clearly one that is a significant assumption that we receive from the actuary and incorporate within the accounts. And also our own creditor and debtor transactions and assumptions we make. But particularly pensions and property are generally the two biggest estimates that we rely on external experts for, and they're clearly an area of significant audit work as well. I think that's the key changes really. The rest of the responses are generally just explaining our existing environment that we can do to do planning and respond to that.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions for Neil? I'll start with Councillor Hayden.
Thanks, Neil. It was just one about the changes to law and regulations. It's well documented about how, you know, they're monitored once they get into the council. But I was just wondering, how do they come into the council? Do they come via a central point? How do you know when legislation and regulations are going to change?
So it depends a little bit on what they are. Obviously, if they're financial regulations or anything related to that, we get advised. I mean, Grant Thornton themselves send through us changes. If there's changes that are significant, we'll get advised by government if there's things that impact us. Often a lot of the things have been trailed via consultation well in advance. Some things are coming for years in advance of them being implemented in the financial statements. I mean, for this financial statement, bearing in mind that we would have concluded it a while back, changes would have had to be made well over a year ago to come in, and obviously then it's colleagues. I mean, if there's substantial change in the law that impacts, we would receive reports through SMT or anything like that to say these are the kind of knock-on impacts to us. Generally, in respect to the financial statements, it would have to be something that would have an absolute financial side. So we get SIPFA bulletins and responses from there. We get the code of practice and the code of the local authority accounting code each year. So those details will be within there in our requirements for the accounts. So there's a kind of wide range of resources that we've got available to us.
Councillor Green?
Yeah, just one area, you said quality of diversity is not applicable. Obviously, this is subject to getting a kick in at the moment, and unfairly so, because it's really important that we maximise the skills of people that have got disability and of different race and colour and creed and all that sort of stuff. So I just wonder why there's a not applicable against that at the moment in time.
I think it's specifically in relation to this report. So
Right.
it's saying equality and diversity implications in respect of the response to the management inquiries. There's no equality and diversity implications because it's a report in that context. It's not changing a policy.
Right.
It's not proposing anything different.
Yeah, cool. All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Any more questions? Nope. Okay. This item's for a decision, so can I move to vote on approving the management responses? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Clifford, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Hayden. Can we have a show of hands, please? Thank you. And we'll move on to the next item. The Chair of Governance Committee response to external audit. To external audit planning enquiries, pages 241 to 248 in your papers. The amount of work that I put into this, you would not believe. Jackie's going to present.
Hi, yes, so as Chair said, this is his responses to the external audit planning inquiries. So this has a lot of similarities with the report that Neil's just presented. Basically, in line with the auditing standards and to support external audits work, they ask us questions which assesses how we deal and assess with the risk of fraud within the organisation. Again, as Neil advised, there's not actually been a lot of change over the last 12 months. So a lot of the answers might be very similar to what you've seen last year. A lot of the policies, the processes, they've been updated, so they are in line with current requirements, but our responses haven't dramatically changed from previous years, and we've outlined those in the appendix attached. I'll just draw your attention to something that has changed, which was the additional question at the end in relation to climate-related matters, which is not a question that we've been asked previously. But apart from that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jackie. Any questions for Jackie? You're getting off lightly now. Again, this item is for decision, so can I move to a vote on approving the response? Show of hands, proposer, Councillor Clifford, Councillor Green, show of hands, please. Thank you. Item 10, the SIP for Resilience Index. This item is for us to consider and note the report. Neil is going to present the report. Thanks.
So we've been bringing the SIP for Resilience Index for a number of years now. It's really one of the few tools for benchmarking in respect of councils' kind of financial sustainability. There are issues with the data, and I think that's the first thing to say. It kind of tells some stories, but I think even SIP for themselves recognise that it's limited. It is 23-24 data. It's from government returns that councils do. The quality of how they fill in those returns dictates sometimes some of the figures that are within there as well. So there is some limitations to it. I think the point I would make is in respect of specifically Chorley Council's position, there are prudential indicators which form part of our budget pack in the capital strategy and the treasury strategy, which give indicators and some commentary around our specific position. And I think reading that alongside this probably helps give kind of some clarity as to our individual position. That said, there isn't really an alternative, so it is useful to kind of look at it and pick out to see if there's any kind of significant differences. So it mainly looks at reserves and funding. They have withdrawn the first measure, which was one of the key measures, the reserve sustainability measure. And I did speak to SIPFA about the removal of it. And I think what they said was it was getting distorted to the point that it didn't give value and didn't tell the story that it was intending to. And I think across a number of them, certainly because the Resilience Index includes unitary authorities, the districts are outliers generally on a lot of these indicators because of the relatively smaller budgets, and individual fluctuations can mean suddenly when it's proportionately done, it generates a really high number. So I think that's what SIPFA have tried to do in some of the indicators, manage them to stop the tremendous outliers which are probably distorting averages and means across them. But in terms of the individual indicators themselves, it does show a story. I think in terms of the story around reserves, it shows a post-COVID, there was a bump in reserves because people got funding that then had to be refunded to government through business rates and various other sources. So for a temporary period, everyone's reserves went up, and then subsequently that started to reduce back down again. So I think particularly in the third indicator, you'll see that the tables have gone from everybody going up pretty much to a mixture to everybody going down. And I think there is two interpretations of that. One is absolutely people are using reserves to help support the financial position, but some of it is in relation to specific reserves being refunded as well. And I think that's probably not showing you the true picture of what that indicator would in normal times. And I know it's a long time after to still be talking about COVID, but unfortunately it does kind of trail across these years. In respect of the other ones, interest payable against net revenue expenditure, again, we're kind of the top third maybe in that category. We do have significant interest payable for an authority of our size, but we generate a lot of income from the kind of debt that's been accrued from that. So I think later on there's a fees and charges indicator where we're also in the top third. And I think a lot of that is generated from those assets that the debt relates to. So it has stayed relatively stable, as has debt, over the last few years. We haven't had as significant a capital programme, or I should say, a significant capital programme funded from borrowing. So that's when the debt increases, when we're funding it from borrowing. So we have got some major schemes in the capital programme, but they're generally grant funded or we've got some sale monies, or we've got some other resource to fund that programme. So generally, in relation to debt, we haven't seen a huge increase in debt over this period. Going forward in respect of fees and charges, I mentioned that we are one of the kind of top end of there, and that's partly due to the nature of the kind of activity that we undertake with Primrose and Tatton and the various other kind of commercial side of things. And then in respect of the council tax requirement, I think this is quite interesting that we are starting to dip below 50% of our overall resource comes from council tax. And I mean, partly that's business rates supplementing that, but partly that is the kind of other fees and the other income that we generate. So it is less than half of our overall revenue expenditure. And then just the growth above the baseline, there is currently a business rates consultation open as we speak, which is due to close in June. That will reset the baseline that was set a number of years ago. Chorley has benefited significantly for growth above the baseline, and I think this puts us somewhere in the middle, but actually we've done, for an authority of our size, and this is a key budget risk that we've also identified, we do benefit significantly above the baseline. And I think they're the main points I'd make about the indicators, if anyone's got any questions.
Thanks, Neil. I think as Neil alluded to, the figures are only as good as the information you put in, aren't they? Any questions for Neil? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. It's a really good summary of that. It is out of date, obviously. So I just wondered if we, in our internal reporting, use any of those indicators during the year. So from a 24-25 point of view, are we reporting on what the reserves position is, etc., ignoring the fact that you can't benchmark it at that point, whether we actually use that. I think it's good to see Chorley performing well against the indicator, so the benchmarking is useful, but as ever with this stuff, it is usually significantly out of date. So do we do anything, do we monitor them during the year at all?
In terms of the specific indicators that are here, no, because ultimately they're produced from the government revenue outturn forms, which are done only once a year, and they're quite a huge job to actually undertake that. We have other indicators internally where we'll look at like the amount of reserves left compared to our overall revenue budget. Clearly we have collection rates for council tax and business rates and other indicators that we kind of use to detail where we are. I think, I mean, again, personally, the value of an indicator versus the actual value of reserves, I think certainly in the VFM conversation when we have them, we talk about what's your risk in your budget report, which for our business rates is substantial. What reserves have you got to potentially mitigate that over a period of time? They're more the conversations that we have. So we do hold reserves, which for a period might help us transition if we do get a significant business rates cut. So they're more, we talk more about the actual numbers than an indicator as such, because we don't have anyone to benchmark against if we produce that.
Thanks, Neil. Any more questions for Neil? Sorry for not switching my microphone on. Do you want me to repeat it, or are you okay?
So people who were on the committee last year will remember we brought this and closed down a number of these charities last year. Most of them had very small amounts of money in there, and the administration around maintaining it, reporting on it, was becoming more burdensome than the actual value of the cash involved. So this year they are still reported on because it's showing the end of those charities. So the majority of the charities you'll see end around September. All those funds have now been dispersed to the relevant bodies that were approved to be dispersed to. There is one charity then that remains. It was the charity that had the most significant assets still and investment income and was still generating funds, so had the most kind of value to continue. That asset is the proceeds from the sale of the former Free Library, and I think the accounts for that one are on page, just scrolling down to the page, 271. And we have dispersed some of those funds in year, so there was a meeting in year which allowed for the allocation of some of those funds. I know if you don't start allocating funds and don't keep managing these charities, the Charities Commission will come and say, what are you doing with those charities? So there has been funds dispersed. There is income generated from the assets from that charity, and that charity will remain and continue. Next year, it will be simply a report on this charity, but it's just, these are the final accounts for them all.
Thanks again, Neil. Any questions for Neil? Hopefully next year it'll be even quicker. This item is, we're asked to approve the accounts within these appendices. So can I move to a vote on approving the accounts? Do I have Councillor Clifford, Councillor Hayden, all those in favour? Thank you. And finally, sorry, not finally. Item 12, the annual governance statement, which is in the supplementary agenda pack. This item is for decision, and we're asked to approve the draft annual governance statement, which Taz will present.
Well, actually, Chair, I'm going to take this one, just my first run out before the committee. Members, the report, I think, gives you a clue as to the annual governance statement. It's something you receive every year. It is, in fact, a snapshot in time as to how we have achieved things in the previous year. The Council is required to ensure, of course, it is in place a sound system of governance, and as part of that, the Council is required to publish the annual governance statement. The statement is developed alongside the statement of accounts, and the actual production and preparation of the annual governance statement is to some extent guided by some CIPFA information in relation to what it should contain and how it should be produced. The statement itself is required to be signed off by the leader and the chief executive, but it's important to note that its development and its ownership rests collectively with the senior management team and their officers. However, the CIPFA guidance also makes it clear that there should be a review undertaken by a body, such as a governance committee, that has not been involved in the production of the AGS. So it's prepared and it's brought to you for you to look at, to review, and hopefully to agree. So looking at the actual statement itself, it's in the appendix document, members. For those of you who are continuing members from last year, you'll probably note something very familiar about the wording. To be candid, we did not reinvent the wheel in relation to the basic central body of the report. The parts that are probably quite unique rest in some of the wording, and in particular in the matrix that's contained at the end of the report. So just to briefly go through the sections, the introduction is pretty much what I said already. The what is corporate governance is a matter that we know it's about ensuring that in our dealings, in our mechanisms for reaching decisions and operations, we are transparent, ethical and legal. We have the Council Governance Framework, which is shown at Section 3, and Section 4 shows you what steps are taken, what information is gathered to be able to produce the governance statement itself. So it itemises yourselves, the Governance Committee, joint committees, the Scrutiny Committee, the various officers who are involved who are responsible for governance, and the other bodies that are involved in preparing statements that go towards an overall position statement in relation to governance. Members, you'll note at the end of that section there is the opinion of the internal audit, which you've already heard in another statement earlier in your agenda, that for this year the performance is adequate, and so that's an important point to note in the statement going forward. And then finally, there is the matrix, which shows work that's been completed that you were previously aware of, work that is continuing that's not been completed from the previous year's work, and the additional tasks added on to be the work for the coming year. Chair, that is the contents of the statement. Perhaps I would not say any more on it and refer it to the committee.
Thanks, Howard. Any questions for Howard? And my apologies, I was just reading miswritten. Councillor Green.
Just want to make an observation. I've been a councillor now for a year, and just in terms of the member training we've received, it's been very, very good actually. I was quite surprised how much training we actually got. I think that's really helped us, play a part in the council. And one of my favourite ones was the risk management one, obviously being my line of work. So that was very good. So yeah, thank you.
No more questions. This item's for decision. So can we move to a vote on approving the annual governance statement? Councillor Clifford proposing. Councillor France, she's not. All those in favour, thank you. Thanks. And item 13, the RIPA application update. This item is for noting, and Taz will present this.
Very short, actually. I'm pleased to confirm that there have been no RIP applications.
Tell you, one day you're going to surprise us all. There'll be just deadly silence.
I can help in not.
Item 14, any other urgent business previously agreed with the chair? We have none, so this concludes the meeting. I'd like to thank all the officers for attending and our independent members. Most grateful. Thank you. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 23rd of July.